My name is Susan Gravatt. I started blogging sort of casually back in like 2021. Um, Always have been from then till now, and don't really anticipate changing this, have been focused on desserts, um, with a little bit of a specialty in just like desserts in general, but also like baking tutorials, like fun cookies, cakes, cupcake types of designs and things. So that's been my focus thus far. And then I would say maybe like 2022, like late 2022, I started taking it a little bit more seriously and trying to figure out like how to make it, make my website just more interesting, a better experience for people visiting, just trying to soup it up as best I could. But also doing that while then and now still working a full-time job. So I would love to be doing this full time, but I'm just for now kind of working on it when I can, and as much as I can to make it a better website for people. So
Awesome. Thank you. And then before we had our audit and coaching call together, what were the top three problems or frustrations that you were dealing with?
I would say the probably the biggest one that made me want to have an audit was just the lack of consistent traffic, and tied into that also just not really knowing how to improve it. Like what could I do differently, to make my site better, to make individual posts better, just the whole user experience, I think, and not really having, it's like always a process, like you're forever learning how to do those things better. But pre-audit, I just felt like those areas were especially daunting and confusing. Um, and then too, I mean, I guess it still ties into SEO, but thinking more about like the technical things to set up on my blog, like I wasn't correctly naming files and like having that correspond with like a recipe or something that I wanted to rank for. So just really like the technical, all things technical, but also SEO and just trying to figure out how to drive more traffic. Because those things were definitely a little bit more of an abyss at that time. So
Like, if you hadn't done the audit with me and things had stayed the same for you, how would that have impacted your business?
so I think before the audit, I was really, and I still would love to do this full time, once I kind of can get to that point. But before the audit, I just felt like I was sort of at the end of my rope as far as, not really having even like a vision or path forward, like how can I do this? Because it just seems like I'm trying this, I'm trying that, and nothing is really changing the website itself or changing even like how I feel about it. So it was starting to be kind of, I wouldn't say a negative experience, but sort of discouraging to work on it. And just thinking like, okay, well, if I want to do this full time one day and my numbers are so low and I'm not sure how to change them, like where could this even go? So I think having the audit and going through it in such a step-by-step way where, it wasn't like, just kind of some general broad strokes of feedback, but really like, okay, we're going to look at this particular thing for SEO, like how to set up a template that's going to be really helpful for users, and kind of following a format for your post, how to make your images optimized correctly. All of these different like small things that came together that just make my website make so much more sense to me, and how to like improve it, and just to like how I think about it for myself and how I can display it and share it for other people. So definitely like a mindset shift and just, giving me more hope of like this is how I could improve it if I just continue to follow these steps. I have like a roadmap, which I was lacking before.
Yeah. And then how would that have impacted you personally?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think by that point, like pre-audit, I was like, just what else can I do? It's kind of sort of just like disappointing and not really feeling like I have a clear direction of what to do, and where to go and how to improve it. So I think, without the audit, I would have definitely um kind of slowed down, I guess, while I on my own might have tried to figure things out, which might have worked sort of, but like probably would have taken so much longer and still been like an incomplete process because I feel like you can't know what you don't know if you're, learning something new and trying to pick up a skill set. And so like everything SEO and setting up a food blog, just I felt like I was kind of missing some key technical pieces to it. Um, but having the audit really distilled that and made it, much clearer of a process. It wasn't so vague and confusing.
You've kind of touched on these, but what are three things you've taken away from the audit that have made a big difference?
Totally. So I think in general, just in going back a little bit to like the mindset, just being more confident about SEO, and not even just like, oh, I know it all now. Obviously, that's just not how something like this works. But just feeling like, okay, even if I don't know something, like now I know more people that, somebody like you, I'm like, okay, if I was really struggling, I know if I like pinged Kayla, she would be happy to help, or I could probably find this even in like the resources you share. But so thinking more holistically about that and not feeling so like, it's something I can't figure out or I haven't figured out yet. I'm just like doomed, like there's no hope. Like now I'm like, okay, there's other people, resources. So again, just kind of the mindset shift of like other people have done this. There are options out there. It doesn't have to be so confusing and vague. You just kind of like have to open your eyes and your mind to that. So I think that was super helpful. Um, and then of course, kind of in tandem with that, like feeling more confident about SEO and better plugged into resources that offer guidance. Just again, like acknowledging that those are out there if I seek them out, and continuing to try and always learn. I feel like just watching you go through the audit, I was like, wow, there's so much more I can do for my website. And knowing that like almost like the possibilities are endless, but not like spiraling into like, oh, I should try and do everything, but just realizing that there's like lots of ways and lots of solutions out there. Um, I think also another big one was kind of towards the end of the audit, I remember talking to you about like feeling stressed that I need to always be creating new content and like because after the audit I was like, oh, there's so much stuff that I could improve and I should improve, but I feel like, oh, I have to be making more, doing more. And you were like, yeah, you actually don't. It's good to of course be creating new things, but if you have like a good set of recipes, good photos, like you can kind of work with what you've got to maximize it. And I think, again, as a mindset shift, that helped to redirect energy that was sort of like, as a creative person, you're always thinking of like the next project, the next thing that I can do that will be fun and interesting. But if you're not fully wrapping up your other projects, your other blog posts, like really giving them their due diligence, um, you can kind of you're almost like missing out on low-hanging fruit in a way. So to take a step back and be like, okay, I have recipes I really love and I'm proud of. I don't have to, always be churning and burning for the next thing. I definitely have room to improve my existing work. Like, how can I better do that? And so it's a little bit of like a working smarter, and not harder mentality. And then also giving myself the like permission to do that too. And not feeling so like, oh no, a week has passed and I haven't posted 3 new recipes. Like that was just a burden that didn't need to be there. And you like alleviated that.
What's different for you now, business wise, like traffic and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel again a lot more confident, like just sharing my website, which I think is huge. Like before, I was like, "Ooh, it doesn't look as good as I would like," but occasionally I put it out there. And I, wasn't even as consistent before, with like my email newsletter, which I've done pretty consistently in the last like 2 to 3 months. So that made a huge difference, just the feeling of it, but also like as far as numbers go, if I compare the last roughly 30 days of my traffic versus looking back, in the month prior to my audit, it's just like no question that my website improved as far as SEO and the ability to like attract people to it and keep them on the page longer because the numbers, kind of tell the story themselves, but it's generally like a like 4 times as many site visitors now compared to pre-audit, which is like really encouraging because then I'm like, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm implementing the right steps from the audit. So I think that's probably like the biggest takeaway there.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a huge growth. So
Yeah,
I'm
we
so
love to
excited
see
for
it.
you.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, definitely. What's different for you now personally?
Yeah, I think too, like just working on my website now is more fun. Like even before this call, I was looking at um I feel like your website is always like a guiding light, even just like its existence as it is. But then having the audit too, it's like, okay, I see how like Kayla does things on her website. Like now I understand some of this better. So today I was just working on playing around with like the layout from a little bit more interesting stuff displayed seasonally. Um, so really just on a personal level, like having more fun with that and not, of course, not just throwing out whatever I want at any time and changing it up a lot, but like being more strategic, but knowing how to do that and thinking about like what I should be displaying to people now and kind of trying to guide them to, it just feels much better to know and have a little bit more like confidence about how to do that well. And then when you're good at something, I think you just inherently like enjoy working on it. And so I'm by no means like a pro now, but I feel much better and much more knowledgeable than I did. So taking those skills and applying them to my website just makes it like less daunting to make changes to it, makes it more fun to switch it up and kind of, see what this does this work for now. If it doesn't, that's okay. I can play around with it because I know how to do that better. Post audit. So I think all of those things just like have made a big difference. And even in my time, like I said earlier, how I dedicate time to working on my existing recipes that I know could be improved as far as how they're laid out and written, versus like dwelling on needing to create new content. I think that has just made me a lot less stressed as far as recognizing I already have things I can work with and improve versus the need to like churn out something new all the time. So I think it definitely gave me more balance.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, definitely like work with what you have and build
Yeah.
that solid foundation.
Yes.
And that's
Big
great that like you are a little more confident, like you're not afraid to play around with stuff on your site.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to always want to do that, but I would just be so reluctant. And like the theme I was using was pretty static. So, that was also like a limitation. There was only so much I really could do with that. But now it's so much more, it feels like more malleable in a really like inviting way and it's like more playful almost. And I'm just not as intimidated. I'm like, okay, I most likely am not going to break everything by changing this one small feature. And if I do, I can roll it back. It's all good. So it's just like much better vibes.
Good. What are the top three lessons you've learned that you wish other food bloggers would know?
I think one of the big ones is like if I could go back in time and do this audit like many years ago, I would have. Like if I had, again, it's like you don't know what you don't know sort of thing. But knowing what I know now, I'm like much more excited to ask for help because I'm like, there's no reason not to. And I think you also, yes, even when you're paying for a service like an audit, you really, if it's a legitimate service, you're gonna invest in it, but it's gonna be worth it if you take it seriously. So I think that's important for, if you want a business of any kind to grow, whether it's a food blog or something different, it's not, it might happen eventually if you do it all on your own and you just like slog through it, but it does help to work with experts who are expert in things that you don't understand or know about yet. And I think it just fast tracks your experience and like feeling towards success. So if I could say one thing, it would definitely be if there's any area where you feel like you're lacking in your food blog knowledge, like try and find the expert, whether it's a paid service or free, whatever that may be for you. Try and do that sooner rather than later because it's just so worth the alleviation of like stress and time that it takes off of you to have someone guiding you. So I think that's like definitely again, I've thought about that so much. I'm like, oh, if I'd only done this sooner. So maybe that's my like really big takeaway for right now. And if I think of another, good point to add on to it because I just like that one is so huge.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, just do
Yeah,
it.
you don't
Just
have to
do
do
it.
everything on your own.
I guess, I mean, maybe a small addendum to it is also like having a good foundation for your website. It sort of ties into that too, but like the theme that I was using and that I thought was good, like I just didn't understand how it worked, which, part of that was like learning that in an audit, but like if I could do that over again too, like I could have figured that out a little sooner on my own if I just like focused on that a bit more instead of like new recipes, new like learning how to take photos. Like there's so many pieces that do matter and they make sense. So it's like hindsight's 2020. But yeah, I just wish that the website that I had been working off of was like more felt like it was part of the 21st century instead of just like hunks of text and block and things. It just so yeah. But again, that was like also partly in having an audit, it like knowing it was coming, I wanted my site to like be in a good condition to even again like show it to someone and not be like, well, here's this thing I'm sort of embarrassed about. Like, can you audit it? Versus like, okay, this definitely needs to be improved, but at least like the foundation is decent. Like, how do I build it from here? So yeah, I think having a good theme, huge difference. Huge
Yeah.
difference too.
Yeah, I remember you saying that you were like nervous to reach out
I
because
was
you
like,
didn't want
oh
me to look at your
no, who's gonna
site.
look at this and not be like, what are you doing? So yeah, that's a
Yeah,
fun
no,
one.
I think that's a good point. Just like taking the time in the beginning to like focus
Yes,
on quality and getting everything laid out well so you don't have to go
yes,
back to it later. Yeah.
totally. Like get all your ducks in a row and then you can add more ducks, but like you need
Yeah.
to start with just a few ducks and
Mhm.
make sure they're happy before you expand the pond.
I like that. And then any advice for those who are interested or hesitant about coaching? So you kind of just
Literally
said
just do it.
that.
Just do it. Like I can't really think of an instance where like I would say it's a bad idea or don't do it. I mean, yeah, it's just if you're thinking about it, you're probably thinking about it because you know something is missing or could be improved. Otherwise, why would you even be wondering, I wonder if I should get an audit? So I think that small voice is probably telling you something you should listen to and just go ahead and pursue it. Because you're not going to know what the experience is like until you've pursued it. And so then you kind of have this nice framework you can follow as a roadmap going forward. Um, but it's hard to move forward if you don't have that. And I'm not sure where else you'll really get it if you're not getting an audit and you feel like that's something that would be helpful to you. Yeah, it's just nice to have somebody like kind of lay it out plainly for you if you're struggling to know what's the next best thing to do.
Do you have any regrets for doing the audit?
Um, no. Like if the only thing again, it's kind of not a double-edged sword, but I feel like with an audit, I could have ahead of the audit, like I could have spent even more time trying to like tidy up my site to make it in an even better I guess like position on my part before sharing it with you or anyone who's considering an audit. But again, it kind of goes back to the like, okay, well, how long are you gonna try and forge this path on your own? Um, you can do that, but you could also be doing it wrong. So it's kind of, again, it goes back to like, I think it's just better to do it in whatever state you're in, regardless of how imperfect your blog might be, because it just there's no shame in having a flawed website. Like no website is perfect out there. So why beat yourself up over it and be like, oh, is my site even good enough for an audit? Because I felt like that was something that I sort of contemplated for a while too. Um, I would say that's really the only thing is to just not overthink it. And if I had a regret, it's like just go ahead and put yourself out there for the audit and you know, don't be so worried about how it might be seen or perceived because at the end of the day, everyone, like your goal and the auditor's goal, like you in this case, it's just to make a website better, even if it's like real bad and it gets really good, the upside is you have so much room to grow. So you're going to feel just relieved you did it and happier, instead of just like waiting around for it to be better. Just, So yeah, I don't have any regrets about the audit. Um, like I said, I wish maybe I'd done some more parts of it sooner, but no, no regrets.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for answering that. Are there any resources you've taken from the audits or like resources I shared and made yours?
Um, One that I remember actually seeing before the audit, but I feel like you end up using pieces of it in the audit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's your like guide for image optimization. So I remember seeing that. That was actually one thing that made me realize like I need an audit because I was like, what is she talking about in this guide? What do you mean? I have short pixel. What else could I do to these images? And then I watched the whole video and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many photos to fix. Um, which is just funny now. But yeah, like seeing that actually encouraged me more to do the audit. And it is something I've like referenced, not as much now because I feel like, okay, I like get the gist of this. But especially initially, I was like, oh, I really gotta figure this out and like do this correctly. So that was a big one. Um, I think in the audit, you also I guess I don't know if you give it explicitly or more just like talked about it, but even having like a template, kind of like the format for the blog posts themselves. And I feel like you've shared a version of that too, maybe in your email newsletter, something like that. I feel like I have this from you. So, and I don't remember what
I
way
might
I
have, yeah.
received it since it's been a while now, but definitely like post audit. I remember being like, okay, now I know how to lay out this post because of what Kayla has said. Um, so and of course like tweaking it a little bit because like no template is perfect for every single post. Um, but that was huge because it just made it so much less confusing to even start a blog post. Like, what am I supposed to write now? What should go here? What makes sense there? So that was a big one. I feel like there were a couple others that um if you say resources that are in the audit, I'll be like, oh yes. And I'll probably say, yep, yep, uh-huh. I used all of those. I'm just
Okay,
forgetting
nice.
like where I got some of your guidance because you give so
Yeah.
much. So I'm like, was it an email or my actual audit? So that's my problem.
No, this was great. Thank you so much for sharing everything.
Yeah, totally. More than happy. Again, just get the audit. That's the whole my takeaway. Just do one.